the Polyend tracker worth your time as a hip-hop producer? Let's talk about it.
Traptendo.
What is going on, peoples? Vertical scrolling timeline madness happening in front of us. Let me explain. So let me get into my boomer hat here and talk about the late 80s, early 90s, because that was a time where not too many samplers were out there, but there was one that was an actual computer and the other one was the MPC. The one that was the actual computer was called the Amiga 1200. Yes, I know about the 500. And then there was the MXX by Yamaha, but the Amiga 1200 had what you called a tracker based software on there, and it looked a lot like this using hexadecimal, and a lot of composers used those back then. There was the Atari ST. I do know about that as well, but for the most part, this is where it was at, or the MPC. So, as you know, technology changes, times change, DAWs with linear timelines come around, and like I was talking about the Atari ST that had Q-Base 1 on there with MIDI in and MIDI out, you can expect a lot of people had changed over, as well as technology getting better. But the Polyend tracker here that I'm holding in my hand is pretty cool. As you can see, it's really small, and it has what you call an encoder right here and mechanical buttons to represent that time. And even this right here, which is where you would action out these MIDI pads, they're shaped like a computer, like a keyboard. And yeah, it has some interesting things that I'm gonna get into. The body itself, yeah, it's pretty smooth. It's aluminum with a matte finish, and it's not really too like you don't really get any fingerprints and stuff like that. I just want to show you. You can see some of them on the mechanical buttons. And yes, they are pretty loud. I'm pretty sure you can hear that. Yeah, they're pretty loud. But a lot of people are intimidated by this thing because of its vertical timeline. Well, let's hear some tracks. Well, let's talk about the I/O real quick. So to give you a cleaner look at the I/O in the unit itself, you can see that you have your line out right here, and yeah, it's 3.5. They all are. It comes with an adapter both for your MIDI in, so a 3.5 to a 5-pin DIN. You have your line in, so if you want to record stuff in, you also have a mic in too as well, which you'll find it to be pretty stunning that you can plug up a guitar straight up to this or a microphone and it will power it up. I'm actually lost because there are units that cost more or that allegedly do more that can't do that. Your MIDI in and MIDI out, of course, are 3.5, and then you have a mini or micro SD slot right here, and it comes with a micro SD slot. And then on this unit, since this is the second iteration of this unit, they did make some changes to it, fortunately, unfortunately, and this has a Type-C port. So that way you can power it up via a Type-C plug, which they supply you with, and then that is the power right there, so you can turn it on and off. All right, so you already heard some of the things in the beginning of the video of what it can do. You know, I just wanted to show it. It can do hip hop, funk, whatever, you know, and that's one of the things I like. Again, mechanical keys. You know, there's no stop button to play. And you got to be very leery of when you have the record button on, but this is how you get most of the functionality out of it. So what I'm going to do is just go into an empty project here so I can show you some of the other things that it can do. I'm going to save that real quick, and there you go. You know, you can save your tracks in here. I should show you how that looks like when you save a track, but I kind of want to reserve that because I'm going to walk you all the way through this like I usually do when I get new devices and stuff like that. I had to make your first beats and stuff like that, but yeah, you can see that it has most of its major functionality. I know people are not fans of clicky buttons, but the mechanical buttons just is a throwback to the mechanical buttons on a keyboard itself. And them having about 1 million presses, you know, that's a really good impression as far as buttons go. But yeah, it's one of those things you deal with. So, you know, you have your master track, you can turn stuff up and down on here. And mind you that this is a different version. I do have the newest firmware version of this, but I do want to just pull up some stuff here. So I actually can bring up a project. I'm gonna open up a project here, and this is where I want to show you some of the things here. I did a jungle track, not very great. It was my first attempt with this thing. And you know, you can go, I'm gonna go into pattern. And this is where I'm gonna show you a couple of things here. So this track number 2, what is this instrument number 2? That is the break itself. So, you know, you can change the different things here. One of the things that it could do very well, and I mean very well, is that you can do randomization through fills and stuff like that. So this track right here, what is this main track? Let's see here. Let's go into that track on track 2. Okay, that is the drum break. So, you know, you can go into fill and you can choose like each 1 step, each 2 step, and choose to put a certain amount of notes inside of there, so you can actually chop up the break. Chopping up the breaks, matter of fact, is pretty cool because you do have the option to chop up breaks into different sections. So you do have the option to chop up breaks. You know, this is by entering the sample editor itself. And you know, you have different options from ping pong loop, 1 shot, slice, and then B slice. B slice is the way you would chop it up, more like MPC style. You have wavetable and granular synthesis, where you can change like length of the granular synthesis and all that stuff. So yeah, it has the amount of options that you would want in terms of basic functionality. And you can get really weird with this thing, and that's one of the things that I like. One thing I do want to precaution people on is when you get this, it's not going to be an easy feat to use this at all. Like, I think you should know that this is not the easiest thing to program. And, you know, this is where the taste comes in as far as your taste goes. So, like for starters, you can only have mono tracks and stuff like that, and it's locked that way, but you can play polyphonically. In here, you also have different scales and stuff like that. I would have to go into the configuration. You go into your general, and then you can set up your scales to be either chromatic or whatnot. You can have them right here. So you go right here to pad scale, and then you will set it up to like chromatic or whatever options you want in terms of your fixed scales. You have a whole bunch of different fixed scales from Mixolydian and all the basic stuff that you will see inside of your DAWs now, and then some. I'm pretty sure they're going to add some more scales along the lines here. So I can go minor if I wanted to set this track to a minor and set the root note to C2 or whatever else. And those are the options that you have, but you can play polyphonically. It will just lay out differently. It will lay out on different tracks. So you have to be patient when it comes to laying down your melodies. And that might be a turnoff to people. I know one of the questions is how would you load samples and stuff like that, and again, I would fill you out on that in another video, but you know, you would simply go into your sample loader, go into your folders here. There's different shortcuts that will probably vary depending on which firmware you have. I use home as the enter button. You know, you can just go and travel, get whatever stuff that you want, add next, go over here, go down, and you know, you just add your samples and stuff like that. So that's cool. And yes, guys, you can load in your own samples. Of course, I have my own samples in here. I would just have to do a whole bunch of going back in space and go into my, oh, actually, no, since they have the new shortcuts here, and you'll see that I have a whole bunch of samples on there that are just mine alone and other people that I really like as far as sound design. As far as the sounds go, the sounds, I think it's kind of weak that it comes with, but I think that the Stasma and Concrete colleagues are pretty good. It got a lot of dope drum and bass stuff and things that you would use. So tell me how you feel about this thing, because I feel like the Polyend tracker is quite interesting to say the least. The drum sampler in here is pretty good. I really do wish that it had some type of, you know, time stretch. But to be fair with its limitations, I find it to be pretty cool because of the way that you would look at programming your music inside of a box. Yes, you can use the computer. There is Renoise, and that's like pretty cheap alternative as well. I mean, 75 bucks is way cheaper than $600, which is one of my cons for this, I guess, is that it's pretty expensive for what it offers, but at the same time, what else offers this right here? What other tracker-based drum samplers are out there? And that's where the charm starts to come in, and then you see the novelty behind it too as well. I'm really glad that they chose mechanical buttons. I do wish that these were a little bit more actionable. There are some kinds of glitches with this when you are programming, when you're live recording, because I've had stuff go on to different timelines. Sometimes instruments switch over randomly, even though I have it on note mode using these buttons right here. And yeah, that is a little bit messy. And, you know, I have confidence in Polyend 2 because they have already dropped like 2 firmware updates and they haven't fully released this yet, though I was able to snag one. Do I give this the stamp of approval? I would like to say 90%. Yeah, 90%.